Board members want to start off by saying tonight is about bringing you information so that you can make informed decisions moving forward. We'll get into the timeline about what may need to happen should you choose to opt out of House Bill 581 or Amendment 1 down the road. But this is all about me doing what I think is my job, and that's bringing you information related to what your options are with a piece of legislation that quite frankly will be one way or the other. It's going to be very consequential for the school system. There is no vote tonight. I understand that some groups in the community had led some in the community to believe that you would be taking some sort of action tonight. There's no action being taken. In fact, the earliest you could take action on this would be at your regular February board meeting. And we'll get into the timeline on that here in just a few minutes. Mike, if you'll go to the next slide, just a little bit about the ballot language and what this is. There was a statewide floating homestead exemption that was passed by referendum with over 60% local and statewide approval. It's interesting, on the ballot it was listed as a statewide homestead exemption. We've since gotten clarification from the state that it is now considered a local exemption. And that has some implications for you related to things like local fair share, and we'll get into that more in a minute. I will say the exact ballot language is there on the screen for you. And you can see that it mentions the question of whether the Constitution should be amended. And it also at the very bottom says which any county, consolidated government, municipality, or local school system may opt out upon the completion of certain procedures. It was right there on the ballot. So let's be clear about what was there. You can go to the next one, Mike. Some other provisions. It authorizes a special sales and use tax that is aimed at providing property tax relief. And it's subject to local referendum approval. It revises the assessment and appeals process, and it requires the Department of Audits and Accounts to conduct economic analyses on any income tax credit within 2 years. And it revises the notice to taxpayers that they get typically in the summertime, and it now would include an estimated rollback definition on their assessment that they would get, or their notice in the summer. Some dates, of course, November 5th, it was approved by the voters. January 1st is the first day that you could do anything related to this referendum, or related to this piece of legislation. The way it was written, it does not allow anyone to take any action before January 1st of 2025. And you can see there, if a municipality or a school district were to consider opting out, that's the deadline, March the 1st there. Has to be done by March the 1st. You must pass a resolution, and you must complete the required public hearings by this date. Board members, it's very similar to the millage hearing process that you already have in place during the summer. The process would begin with an intent basically to opt out. You have to run ads in the paper. We'll get to those in a minute, but everything has to be done by March the 1st. It has to be filed with the Secretary of State. So you can see their process start, and then March 1st deadline. The public hearings must hold at least 3 before passing a resolution. So it begins with those hearings. One of them must take place between 6 and 7 p.m. on a business weekday to accommodate public participation. And then you must publish notice of your intent in the newspaper of general circulation and on your website. So in this case, it would be the Noonan Times-Herald and on the Coweta County website. The law even prescribes the size of the public notice that you have to put. It's 30 square inches. And it has to be placed prominently in the paper, and it has to be a week before each hearing. Also have to include a press release to local media. It has to be simultaneous when you make that notice. And then again, that resolution would have to be filed by or with the Secretary of State's office no later than March the 1st of 2025. Mike, if you'll go to the next one. There's some potential outcomes of opting in or opting out. I want to take you through what some of those are. One outcome, if you were to choose to opt out, that means you would maintain local control over tax policy. If you opt in, the state now controls tax policy for the local Board of Education. And I'll get into that a little bit more. If you opt out, it would maintain flexibility for future boards related to millage rate, the ability to maintain a lower millage rate. And you have the lowest millage rate for education in the metro area. I'll show that to you in a little while. Opting out, if you were to choose to do so, acknowledges the uniqueness of Coweta County. If you opt in to a statewide solution, you may lose the ability to respond to things that may occur here locally. Just need to know that going in. There's a chance that it will provide greater long-term fiscal stability and sustainability, and I'll get into that here more in a minute. Would maintain our ability to respond to crises locally. Things come up and you need to respond to those. If you have that local control and flexibility related to your finances, you're able to do that. And you still maintain a local ability to respond to rising property values and decreases, and an opportunity, if you choose, to look at other potential exemptions if you were to choose to do so. If you opt in, there's a potential higher property tax burden for homeowners. There's a point where millage rates most likely would need to go up. They would most likely need to. And it could mean that down the road, there are potential higher rates. Once the rate cap is reached, there is no flexibility there. It's greatly diminished once you get to the 20 mil cap. And I'll talk in just a minute about the difference between school systems and other local entities. Once you reach the cap, certainly would have an adverse effect potentially on future boards' ability to innovate or respond to those local crises. The actual long-term consequence or long-term impact is undetermined. We have run the numbers. If the cap had been in place during this year, it would have been an estimated loss for our school district based on 8.11% growth and a 4.10 CPI. It would have been an estimated loss of up to $17.4 million for us this year. It's just what it would have meant for us. There's uncertainty even. I even asked again yesterday. There's uncertainty on what index will actually be used in order to determine what inflationary measure. Is it going to be a regional measure? Is it going to be a national measure? We still don't know. One thing I will mention to you, in this particular piece of legislation, school districts cannot participate in property tax relief, local option sales tax. That's available to cities, it's available to counties. It is not available in this legislation. School districts were specifically excluded from the opportunity to go to the voters on a referendum for an additional local option sales tax under this. And it could impair the district's ability to recover from future recessions or from other market adjustments down the road. If you look at where we are, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about revenue here in just a minute. Opting in, it could make us more dependent on state and federal revenue. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really know what to make of that right now federally. I don't know what's going to happen there. There's been a lot of discussion. Even as recently as today, I saw an article about federal Department of Education could go away. And that goes to the states. So I don't know what that can mean for us. It's possible that opting in could cause us to be more concerned, even than we already are, about local fair share. Opting out could mitigate that. I'm going to show you in just a minute our local fair share. That's 5 mills that we pay to participate in state funding. It was over $40 million this year. I'm going to show you the trends of what that's done. Our QBE formula that we use, the Quality Basic Education formula in the state of Georgia, it is not adjusted annually for inflation. So when the formula is not adjusted, the local fair share goes up, state funding goes down, or the percentage of state funding goes down, The money to run the school system comes from local funds. And I'm going to show you in just a minute what those trends have done over the last 25 years. No considerations in House Bill 581 for enrollment growth. There's nothing there for enrollment growth. Could have a disproportionate impact on our school system because 73% of our tax digest approximately is residential here in Coweta County. We're a very heavy residential tax base here in Coweta. And it could also add to the already disproportionate impact of unfunded state mandates and indirect obligations. I'll give you an example of one. Just last year, the legislature decided that employee insurance costs were going to be solely the responsibility of the school system. I think it was $5.2 million last year, based on that decision that we had to come up with during the budgeting process. Our percentage, our employer contribution to the teacher retirement system last year rose by $1.2 million. That had to come from local funds. Another example of that is when raises are given, and we're grateful when they are for our employees. But when those raises are given by the state, not all employees are covered. We've had this conversation many times. Those funds have to come from us locally. And I'll show you a little bit about how some of those trends have gone over the last few years here in just a minute. Just some key elements there. The exemption does allow the property value to increase. It's just adjusted on that inflationary rate. And I'll remind you once again, we don't know what rate they're going to use. They still haven't told us. The exemption does reduce the amount of property taxes paid. It ensures that the assessed value of a home does not increase dramatically due to market fluctuations. This is the point I'll remind you, board members, you do not assess the value of a home. Your sole responsibility is to levy a millage rate for educational purposes here in Coweta County. You do not assess home value. The assessed value for property tax calculation would be calculated on a base year. It's either going to be 2024 or the year immediately preceding when the exemption's first granted. So in this case, it would be 2024. It's capped by an inflationary rate to be determined by the state. Mike, if you'll go to the next one. Major improvements or reductions are included in the calculation, but they're treated separately. It's automatically renewed. It is automatically renewed. And then people keep other homestead exemptions, either senior, veteran, whatever other exemptions they have. If the local taxing jurisdiction has a more favorable exemption, the taxpayer does keep the more favorable of the two for them. Mike, if you'll go to the next one. Austerity reductions, which is something we've talked about. This is state funding. You can see here, beginning in FY 2003, the state began to reduce funding for Coweta schools. You can see the trend lines there, and back in 2018, austerity ended. Over the life of austerity, I believe it was $119 million between FY 23 and FY 2018. State funding was reduced for the Coweta County school system, $119 million. The decision whether to opt out or opt in is a big one. Just need to know. That's why I typically don't come to you with 26 slide presentations. This is a big one. It's a big one because once you do it, either opt in or opt out, the way this is written, it is forever. I likened this decision to the decision to create the school system back in the late 60s. A group of people made a decision that they didn't want to have a city-county school system anymore. They wanted to have one. And it set our school system on a trajectory to be able to do the things that we've done over the course of the last 60 years, quite honestly. This decision is a very similar decision. You get one shot. That's why I want to make sure to bring you as much information as I can. Austerity to $119 million, a lot of that was due to the recession, the Great Recession that we had. You can see where those trends really bump up. That's during that time of the housing crisis and the Great Recession. The question we really need to answer is if we had another similar situation and we didn't have local flexibility, how would we handle things? I think that will be a guide for you as you begin to look at whether or not you want to opt in or opt out. Do we have the local control to be able to do the things that we need to do? Mike, if you go to the next one. I mentioned state funding. This is the year 2000, I believe. You can see the yellow there is our state funding. The year 2000, our state funding represented almost 61% of the Coweta County school system's budget. It's in the year 2000. Mike, if you'll go to the next one. 5 years later, state funding represented 51.36% of the budget. And you can see the local amount begin to creep up there, 38.36. Go to the next one, Mike. Now the state is at 46.22. That's their percentage of our funding. And the school district locally there is over 42%. So you can see the trajectory that we've been on over the past 25 or so years. One of the questions you're going to have to answer as we decide whether to opt in or opt out is it a good thing to become more dependent on state funding when those numbers are shifting on us? Mike, if you'll go to the next one. You've seen this before. This is our historic millage rate data, 15.41. It's the lowest millage rate since 1983. That's 43 years ago. Lowest rate for education in 43 years. Also, you've lowered it for the last 5, and you increased senior tax exemptions in 2020. Just a reminder here once again, the school systems operate, I call it kind of a financial box, so to speak. The state caps the number of mills you can levy at 20. The state caps your ability to have reserves. You cannot exceed over 15% of your general fund operating budget in reserves. Okay? You also pay a local fair share to participate in state funding. It's the equivalent of 5 mills and over 40 million this year. The question you'll need to answer over the next couple of months is opting in potentially to 581, is that going to be the fourth side of the box? Because again, there are constraints that may come with that in the face of some of those unfunded things that are passed down to us from the state over time. Mike, if you'll go to the next one. It's just your millage rates in the surrounding area. These are 23 rates. They haven't changed substantially, but you can see in the metro, Coweta is the lowest. You can see Henry at 20. Rockdale has a different setup. They're at 21, and Fayette at 19.15 in 2023. If you go to the next one, Mike. That's just a line graph that shows you what our millage rate has done over the better part of the last 50 years or so. And you can see that red line down at the bottom, that's debt. And about 2002, 2003, you can see that red line flattens out. The school system's been debt-free since that time frame. It's just a chart that shows you millage rate and assessed home value, what it looks like with school taxes per 100,000 or per 25,000 there, excuse me, at 15.41 mils. Go to the next one, Mike. Some differences between us and other municipalities. I've already hit on some of these. We have to pay local fair share. There's no such requirement for cities and counties. We're capped at 20 mills. There's no millage rate cap for cities and counties that I'm aware of. We can't request that local option sales tax. I talked a little bit about that earlier. Cities and counties can. We can't. We're excluded from that. And then we have the reserve cap that I just mentioned. That's a requirement that is specific to school systems. I say that to you just to make sure that we all are clear that our conversation has to be very different than maybe other conversations that may be going on locally or around the state between municipalities. We're playing by a different set of circumstances here. I've mentioned local fair share. I won't go to it again. You can see FY22, it was 27.7. It's over 40 million now, and every time that local fair share goes up, that represents a state funding decrease for the school system. That's coming off the top. I mentioned earlier, the ballot called this a statewide exemption. I mentioned earlier that we got information from the Georgia School Superintendents Association, who got it from the legislature, that they've now designated this a local exemption. Let me tell you what that means. That means that the local fair share comes off the top of the digest before any exemptions are applied. There's not a benefit to us for it to be called a local exemption instead of a statewide, which was what was on the ballot. Local fair share comes off the very top of the digest. No exemptions applied there. Go to the next one. This is a line graph that shows you the school system's local fair share, the trend since 1993. And you can see what's happened and what continues to happen to our local fair share. It's a very relevant piece of the conversation that we're going to need to have over the next month or so as we look to make decision about in or out. It's a very relevant piece. It continues to go up. We don't have to look far to see what happens sometimes when school systems are put in this position, especially with the funding box that I mentioned to you. This is, I think, year 4 for Fayette. I believe they have a 3% cap in Fayette. I showed you their millage rate, 19.15, I think it was. For last year, it's bumped up a little bit this year. So they're getting very close to the mill cap there. You can see they're having to maneuver things around. Costs are not going down. We're 90.73% of our budget is people. I mentioned insurance cost earlier. There are costs that are passed down yearly from the state to us, and they're not totally funded. So costs are not going down. You may remember last year when we did budget, we had to increase for electricity, water, things of those nature, just like others are having to do. This is an example. I encourage you, the article's linked there. I encourage you when you get a chance, go read the article and just see what it says about their experience. No two districts are the same, no two systems are the same, but there are some things I think we can learn as we look toward whether we're going to opt in or opt out of this legislation. If you were to choose to opt out, I've put a tentative timeline here. Okay? The process would begin, it'd need to begin pretty quickly after the holidays because of the March 1st deadline. And you can see it's just a tentative timeline on what you would need to do if you were to choose to opt out. Go to the next one, Mike. Just some final things I'll mention to you. The one tool you have related to system finances is that millage rate. It's the one thing that the board has control over to be able to finance the school system, to do the things that our students and parents and community expect of us. I will share with you, I didn't mention the total, but that local fair share amount since 1993 is $590 million is what's been paid in local fair share since '93. Did get some information from the Georgia School Superintendents Association yesterday related to where school districts are and what they're thinking in this process. There was a survey that was done. 76 school systems were considering opting out, 21 opting in, and 22 undecided out of 119 school systems that they surveyed. So it's a lot for us to consider, a lot for us to consider. The last thing I'll say, and I'll be happy to take any questions, certainly be happy to take any questions you have over the next month as you're trying to figure out what you want to do. The last thing I'll say is this. I want to make sure that we don't get our wires crossed regarding what a vote to opt out might mean or what a vote to opt in might mean, okay? If you're to opt out, you're not voting to raise taxes. It's not what you're voting for. For the last 5 years, you voted to lower the millage rate. Again, you don't assess home value, okay? You've done the opposite by lowering the millage. A vote to opt out is a vote to retain the authority and flexibility to do what you've been doing, which is to innovate, to manage the school system's business, to respond to crisis. That's what a vote to opt out would be, to maintain that local control. A vote to opt in is saying we'll go with a statewide metric and we'll opt in to state financing for the school system forever. You're also saying if you opt in that if it doesn't work the way everybody thinks it might, that you're asking the state to fix it and we're giving up the ability to fix our own problem. That's where you are. Again, I don't want to belabor the point. It's a big decision. That's why I wanted to take the time and go through it for you. Nothing can start for you until after the first of the year, but want to make sure that I brought as much information as I could to you related to this. It's huge. It's a huge decision. It's a huge decision for you. Be happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Horton. I think you've given us a lot to consider, a lot to go through, and we appreciate your presentation this evening.
Mr. Copeland, can I ask? I just had a quick question for Dr. Horton.
Yes, ma'am.
Did our legislative delegation give you any information, or did they seek your input
No, ma'am.
before this came about?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
One question for me as well, just to make sure I understand this correctly. You're saying that whatever decision is made, opt-in or opt-out, there's no going back 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road?
No, sir.
This decision has to be made by March 1st. Whatever the decision is, that's the decision, right?
It's forever.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Well, forever until something else comes down the pipe. Yes, sir. There is no opt-in down the road. There is no opt-out down the road. You're either in or out now.
I apologize. Did any other board have any other questions or comments for Dr. Horton?
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank
Dr.
y'all.
Horton, again, thank you. Yeah, we have a lot to review over the coming weeks.